Hello, friend. I want to tell you about the Audi Q7 car. Opinions on the appearance of the first-generation Audi Q7 are strongly divided, but there is no doubt that for many, it was a dream car. The question remains, how much does it cost to maintain it? And is it worth fulfilling a dream from years ago? Engines in the Audi Q7. Until 2010, two petrol engines were offered, 3.6 FSI, 280 horsepower, and 4.2 FSI, 350 horsepower. After the facelift, they were replaced by 3.0 TFSI in two power variants, 272 and 333 horsepower. Importantly, customers did not lose on dynamics because the supercharging gave more torque in the case of the weaker version, while the more powerful 3.0 generates exactly the same value as 4.2, i.e. 440 nanometers. Only that in a wider range of revolutions and from lower speeds, which of course had a positive effect on acceleration, but also on fuel consumption. Only the 3.6 engine was configured with a manual gearbox, and a 6-speed Tiptronic automatic was available as an option. It was standardly connected to the 4.2 unit. However, with the 3.0 TFSI, an 8-speed Tiptronic appeared, and the manual disappeared permanently. In practice, the manual transmission appears as an error in the advertisement. The diesel range included more variants. The 3.0 TDI engine was offered in two versions until the facelift. The simpler one, with 233 horsepower, was installed in cars until 2007, and then the engine was modified, enriched with a NOx filter, increasing power to 240 horsepower and torque from 500 to 550 nanometers. The unit marked as clean diesel was combined with an 8-speed automatic, while the older one with a 6-speed. In the years 2007 to 2009, a 4.2 TDI diesel was also installed in a V8 configuration with 326 horsepower with a 6-speed automatic, and in the years 2009 to 2015, it was paired with an 8-speed gearbox and the power was raised to 340 horsepower. At a similar time, 2008 to 2012, the range also included a 6.0 TDI engine in a V12 configuration with 500 horsepower and an impressive torque value, 1,000 nanometers. It was only combined with a 6-speed automatic. In 2010, an improved 3.0 TDI engine with 204 horsepower debuted, and a year later, a 2, 4, 5 horsepower version was offered in parallel, both with an 8-speed automatic until the end of production. Which diesel engine to choose and which to avoid in the Audi Q7? First of all, we have to start with the fact that almost 90% of cars are diesels, so the choice among these versions is bigger. Of course, the 3.0 TDI engine has a clear advantage here, and let's focus on it. The operating costs of this unit can be considered taking into account its age. The older it is, the cheaper the spare parts, but also the less refined the design. Another problem is the emergency flaps in the intake system, and occasionally there were also seizures, but this was due to oil dilution or a long time between its replacement. In newer units after the facelift, the timing was improved, but here we have a newer injection system, more expensive to repair, and a potentially more complicated design of the automatic. However, speculations at this level do not make sense, because everything depends on the money for buying the car. It is known that those with a newer diesel are definitely more expensive than those with an older one. It is worth emphasizing, however, that among diesels, it is the 3.0 TDI that is the cheapest to maintain, repair, and also the most economical. Average fuel consumption of 10L, 100 kilometers, is a really good value. The 4.2 TDI engine is more fuel-hungry but considered better refined. Here, fuel consumption will be as low as 15L, 100 kilometers, but there are no problems with the timing drive. However, it also has its dark side. Many repairs require the removal of the engine. What's more, 2 cylinders must be added here, which means 2 additional injectors. However, I believe that the V8 TDI is as good a choice as the 3.0 TDI if we take into account both the risk of failure and the cost of repair. I do not recommend the V12 TDI engine. Of course, it is a great design, but after years it can only bring problems. The durability of the unit and accessories is comparable to the V8 TDI, but not the repair costs. Almost all require the removal of the engine, although this is not the biggest problem. Here we have 12 cylinders and an incredibly high work culture and impressive performance for a diesel. And here is the catch. When 2 injectors fail, you won't even feel it. If 4 are faulty, you may feel a slight drop in power, but when you really notice that something is wrong, the engine is already ruined. Leaking injectors will burn holes in the pistons, and the repair costs are comparable to the price of the entire car. These are the words of a Volkswagen technician with whom I had the pleasure of talking about this engine. The problem is that the engine requires meticulous maintenance and a quick response to any problem. Unfortunately, the Audi Q7 with this unit was bought by very wealthy people who did not take special care of the car. Then the next owners avoid servicing like the plague, which is terribly expensive in the case of this engine. I do not want to discourage people who are aware of the potential expenses from this unit. However, without this, it is really not worth it. In practice, this amount should be multiplied by at least 2. I'm leaving aside the topic of fuel consumption, which easily reaches 15L, 100 kilometers, which can be easily exceeded. Let's agree that this is the calling card of the company or model, and it would be best if it remained that calling card. If you really want the 6.0 TDI, buy a car with a certain history and mileage of no more than 200,000 kilometers. Before that, you absolutely have to have a solid inspection done at a service center. Petrol engine for Audi Q7? If I were to recommend an engine for the Audi Q7 with a clear conscience, it would be the petrol versions. Regardless of the year and type of engine, all are durable and relatively cheap to repair compared to diesels. The only recurring problem with all petrol engines is the accumulation of carbon deposits in the intake system, but this can be cleaned. Additionally, the 3.6 engine has a faulty camshaft actuator. Of course, the biggest problem with petrol engines is fuel consumption. From 10 to 15L, 100 kilometers with the 3.0 TFSI unit, through 13 to 15L, 100 kilometers with the 3.6 engine, to 15 to 25L, 100 kilometers with the 4.2 engine. In my opinion, the most reasonable choice is the latest TFSI engine. In the event of a supercharger failure, what about LPG? This is not a big problem for a specialist workshop, but direct injection in each of the engines complicates the situation a bit. A reason to be proud. Quattro. The Quattro drive in the Audi Q7 is one of the best designs in its class. Of course, it is not a classic off-road drive with a reduction gear and mechanical lock as in the Toyota Land Cruiser, but the constant transfer of power to both axles through the Torsen central differential with traction control works very well, both on the road and in easier terrain. However, what is even more important from today's point of view is the durability of this solution. Both the transfer case and the other elements, the shaft, axles, can easily withstand several 100,000 kilometers. Basically, the same applies to automatic transmissions, which do not require more than regular oil changes every 40 to 60,000 kilometers, and their durability is very high. Repair of such a transmission, usually a converter. Is it worth buying an Audi Q7, and which one? Audi Q7 is generally not a problematic car, and the well-developed spare parts market and good knowledge of these cars certainly help. Therefore, despite some imperfections, no greater than those of competitors, it is worth buying a used Audi Q7, as long as it is not a worn-out diesel. In my opinion, the most reasonable choice is the 6-cylinder engines, diesel 3.0 TDI, petrol 3.0 TFSI, or 3.6 FSI. For the braver and wealthier people, the safe and usually trouble-free V8 engines can also be recommended. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, Be sure to write about them in the comments.